Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our Digital Discovery Series webinar. Today's topic is one that's been highly requested by a lot of agencies with regards to how to market during the COVID-19 pandemic that's sweeping the globe. This is obviously a widely talked about topic, the only thing that majority of everybody's focusing on, especially with a lot of the uncertainties that's going around. And, people are looking for some advice right now as to how we can operate during this time period with as little effect to our business as possible. So what we've actually done together today is put together a webinar which talks about just that. We're going to be looking at three different areas. One is looking at COVID-19 from a high level approach and how it's affecting the economy. Number two, we're going to be looking at tips and recommendations for your customers, advice that you can provide to your customers to ensure that they're operating smoothly during this time period. And number three, tips for ourselves as agencies on what we can do to ensure that our business is still operating, and some of the recommendations with regards to services that we can sell and some of the changes that we're seeing and insights that we're seeing based on what's happening in the marketplace. So let's first start talking about the economy. I think it's the very first important thing that we have to look at to really understand the situation is by not just looking at what's happening around us in our local neighborhoods, but we have to understand what's happening from a global perspective, from a country perspective, because everything does trickle down back to us. The very first thing that I think is very important to kind of mention, and I think we all agree, is that there's a lot of lack of information about this disease. And because of that, it's creating a lot of uncertainties. A lot of people have never really faced a large-scale situation. Forget the pandemic. They've never felt a very large effect like this for quite some time. During our generations, we haven't seen anything like this before. And because of that, a lot of people weren't prepared, and are struggling to kind of cope, and they don't really know how to handle the situation. The very first and foremost thing that we should all be doing is, first of all, not panic, right? We're not alone in this. There's a lot of people working on this. So that's the first and foremost thing that we have to do together. Now, because of this pandemic and this lack of information, a lot of bad decisions are going to be made. A lot of rash decisions are going to be made, for the better or for worse, and we have to prepare for that. So we'll talk more about that during our webinar as we go through, and some of the effects. Some of the effects including what you're seeing all around yourselves right now, with a lot of small businesses facing closures, a lot of local services not being as busy because people don't want to invite other people into their homes anymore. Stock prices are being affected. A lot of stocks are dropping. So a lot of things are happening right now, especially at the early phases right now. And there will be even more changes as well, right? So let's kind of look at some of what we're seeing around ourselves right now, especially from a business standpoint. Now, what you're seeing on my screen right now is just a partial list. It's not all the industries and so forth, but this is one of the most biggest industries that we're seeing that are thriving and suffering during this time. With any sort of negative situation, there are also positives. You have to remember that. So we're not trying to make light of a situation. That's the unfortunate reality, is that no matter what happens, there's always going to be positives and there's always going to be negatives. So let's kind of look at which are the businesses that are thriving during this time and some of the businesses that are suffering during this time. So on my left-hand side, you're going to have a list which talks about thriving businesses. And right now, online services are seeing a huge increase in demand, especially because people aren't traveling. They don't want to go to the local stores anymore. So because of that, online-based services and e-commerce are definitely seeing a huge increase in demand. When it comes to food establishments, delivery and takeout is where people are spending most of their time. Restaurants are seeing an absolute hit with regards to the amount of people coming in, because they don't want to situate themselves around in larger groups with the possibility that they may get infected. Grocery stores are probably the biggest winners in this scenario. I don't think there's one grocery store in this continent right now that doesn't have an empty shelf somewhere, of whether it's water or it's toilet paper or whatever the case is. So grocery stores are absolutely getting wiped out clean of products. Another industry that we don't often really look at because of a lot of the restrictions, but one that is actually thriving during this period, is the cannabis and the alcohol industry. A lot of people have a lot more time, and a lot of people are looking to get away from all this negative talk. So, what do people do? If they're recreational cannabis users, they're going to buy more cannabis. Alcohol industry is also increasing, especially because people are staying home more. And a lot of it also actually has to do with a lot of the fears that the alcohol establishments will close. And before they close, a lot of people are going in and stacking up on their alcohol. Now, alongside with this pandemic, obviously, anytime a medical issue arises, health and medical supplies are definitely in demand. So we are seeing a massive increase in that industry. A lot of businesses are now working virtual, working remote, and because of that, a lot of businesses are investing in virtual business tools, whether it's project management software, conference calling software, a lot of digital solutions to ensure that their business is still operating with efficiency during this time period. Now, real estate is a little bit of a weird one. Right now, the funny thing is, in a lot of different markets, not all of them, but a lot of markets, the real estate was thriving. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the governments are not getting as much sales tax. So they're also trying to find other ways to increase revenue by decreasing the amount of interest rate. And when interest rate goes down, people have a higher need to go off and invest. And properties are always one of the biggest things that people do invest in. So we've seen in some communities, property prices have increased more than 15% within the last few months, especially during this virus pandemic that's happening. Now, the reason why it's kind of a little interesting and why we put a star next to it is that it can change at any time as things go on. A lot of the real estate boards are now coming out with recommendations saying no more open houses. So because of that, real estate agents are going to have to try different tactics. Not as many viewings are happening during this time. So as we get further and further into this situation, the real estate industry may change even week by week, month by month as we kind of go in. So that's why we have a star. Right now it's thriving, but at any point in time it could change. Suffering businesses, this is my right-hand list over here. Obviously, the first and foremost industry that's taking the biggest hit is the travel industry. Any sort of tourist attractions are being shut down. Governments are either sanctioning or recommending that larger groups don't get together. So a lot of the tourist attractions, event venues, everything like that are all shutting down. Restaurants, as I mentioned earlier, is taking a big hit. Local staffing, not a lot of people are looking to hire new people during this time. So headhunters and any sort of staffing agencies and organizations are seeing definitely a decline during this time. Auto sales is a little funny one as well. It is suffering because not a lot of people are going out to make these larger purchases right now because typically people don't invest in vehicles when the economy is kind of in an unknown situation because vehicles are definitely an expense. So because of that, auto sales have definitely gone down. However, from the past, we've known time and time again, governments always bail out manufacturers. So it's very possible that they may not be getting as many sales, but will still be okay in the end. So we'll see what happens with that. Retail, I'm sure as you walk down the street or drive down the street, you're going to see a lot of retail locations closed. So they're definitely taking a big hit. Any sort of home services, as I mentioned earlier, not a lot of people want to invite people that they don't know anything about into their homes and servicing unless if it's absolutely needed. So because of that, it's more leaning towards emergency services than calling out contractors and landscapers and so forth to come out and do their regular activities. Transportation business is definitely seeing a decline. Not as many people are looking to travel. People are definitely staying a lot more at home. So a lot of industries are seeing that negative decline that's happening. Now, once again, this is just a partial list. There's going to be a lot more industries, and depending on the areas, a thriving business on our list could be a suffering business. But this is kind of a local North American overview of some of the industries and what we're kind of seeing overall from an average perspective. Now, during this time, let's really look at the economic effects when governments are making all these changes and policies. Businesses such as ourselves are making decisions. During this time, anytime there's a lot of uncertainty, you are going to see currency fluctuations. And currency fluctuations is never really a good thing for the economy because, like right now, for example, in Canada, we've went from about $1.36 US to about $1.45 almost over just a period of 1.5 weeks. So anybody that's paying their bills in US dollars are seeing definitely a massive increase in how much it's costing. So currency fluctuations are happening, and that's also going to be affecting the import and export as well. As currencies change, the amount of investment that happens in foreign countries are also going to change. Alongside with that, import and export tariffs are also going to change. Governments are going to want to still ensure that our economy is moving, so they will either reduce tariffs or restrict certain types of imports and exports depending on what countries they're coming from and what countries they're going to. So we will see some restrictions around that. Stock market seeing massive fluctuations all over the place. And it's still very early, so a lot of uncertainties is what's creating that fluctuation. We are seeing a lot of a lot of increase in government spending, and that it seems like a fantastic positive thing to the average taxpayer. But at the end of the day, we all know our governments aren't like a condo building where they have an escrow of funds for emergency sakes for a rainy day. All of our governments do have national debts. So all this big spending to bail out our economy during this time has to then come back somehow. So it's a lot of analysts and a lot of experts are kind of really curious to see how these governments are going to be recouping these losses later on. A lot of government office closures are definitely slowing down how we operate. For some people that are not doing their taxes on time, it's definitely a good thing because they have more time. But for other people, these extensions and delays don't necessarily mean it's better for them. Crime rates is a little bit funny. In some areas, we're seeing crime rates go down significantly because people aren't outside anymore. And in some areas, we're seeing crime rates are going up simply because police are not as, let's just say, motivated to stop everybody and go out and interact with people. They're being a lot more extra careful to ensure that they also don't get infected by the general public as well. Eviction freezing is another thing that's happening right now. A lot of local governments are pausing the evictions, which sounds like a great thing, but anybody that has rental properties knows there's also bad tenants. So a lot of people that invest in investment properties and have it rented out to tenants, there are going to be a lot of tenants taking advantage of the situation. Not all, but there are going to be some bad apples that are going to take advantage of the situation, not pay rent with the knowledge that they're not going to be evicted. So, and that all these little things are going to trickle back. So even with that tenant that doesn't pay their landlord, well, that landlord is investing in this. Now they're losing money. Well, that loss in money is going to make them, force them into other situations where they may have to sell other things or they may have to make changes in their lifestyle or business. So everything is connected. But at the end of the day, it's not also all that bad either, right? With every negative situation, there's always some positives as well. So let's look at some of the things that are some positive during this time. And I think the first thing is that people are connecting a lot more with each other and building more relationships again. We're not all separated and doing other things. So people who haven't talked to each other in a long time are picking up the phones and seeing each other. People, especially younger kids that don't often spend time with their grandparents, are calling them and checking in. So we're definitely seeing people connecting again. Businesses, a lot of them that are closed are now, instead of servicing their businesses, which they can't because of closures, they're now spending the time evaluating their businesses and focusing on looking at their business as a whole, their financials, their branding. So that's somewhat of a positive. A lot of the older generation are definitely spending more time online because a lot of the outlets are closed. So now that, for entertainment, they have to really look at digital sources. Minimum wage layoffs are definitely igniting some interest in higher education because a lot of these people don't want the situation to happen again. So they are looking at maybe going back to school again, looking to take on some online courses, to that way they can apply for other jobs afterwards. So it's very possible we may start seeing some shifts in the type of workforce that's going to be available to us over the next couple of years. And as well, there's a lot of companies that are giving back to communities. So we're seeing a lot of companies, whether they have good reputations or bad reputations, giving back to the communities and looking like heroes as well, and helping a lot of people throughout this time. So definitely a positive on that front. But overall, as a whole, I think it's very important to understand, and this is going to be one of our messages to everybody, is that we're not going to just paint pretty pictures for everybody. We have to ensure that you understand what the reality is. And right now, it's still very early in North America, and that's why we're saying it definitely will get worse before it gets better, but it will get better. And time will tell a little bit more, as just like you've seen other economies. Even in China, there's been reports that Wuhan is slowly start getting back to normal. The number of cases have started dropping. I think they've had one day where nothing was even reported. Now, of course, there are lots of people saying that's probably not true or whatever the case, but with every situation, there's going to be a time period when we're going to see an escalation of cases, and then it's going to start trickling down as we get tighter on the measures that we put to prevent the spread of this virus. So it definitely will get better, but because we're still at the very, very early phase in North America, we're one of the last areas where this COVID-19 is really taking a big hit on. So we're definitely going to see a lot more cases coming up over the next few weeks. But then afterwards, it will start getting better. Now, whether it takes weeks or whether it takes a few months, we don't know, but that's probably what's going to happen. So during this time, let's talk about what you can tell and advise your customers of what they can do during this time. And I think that's going to be very important because a lot of customers are going to be looking for you for advice as well. So the very first thing that we'd like to recommend that all customers do is definitely communicate. Update their Google My Business listings and their directories to ensure that their customers are informed with the latest information about how to interact with their business, whether it's facing closures and how to contact these businesses during these times. Just as an FYI, there will be some limited Google My Business functionality during this phase. Google is one of those companies that have restricted employees from working in their offices during this time period. So because of that, newer listings and any sort of moderation reviews are going to take a little bit longer. So you are going to see a little bit of slowness in terms of how changes are happening. Some of it is automated, some of it's not, so you will see some delays. If you want to learn a little bit more about how Google My Business functionality is being affected, just Google it. Google My Business during COVID-19, and you'll see an article, typically in the first or second position, support.google.com, with an article directly from Google on what their procedures are going to be. Number two, if they are a local business, definitely put up signs to notify customers that they're closed and how to use the services during closures. And any business should be emailing their customers, whether it's current or past customers, to just send out a general notice of how they will be operating during the COVID-19. I think everybody's probably seen some emails from some of the larger companies, but we're rarely seeing that happen from the small companies. And I think that's highly encouraged, no matter what size business you are, that you should be sending out an email to your customers. Definitely add some posts on your social media channels. This is going to be an area that's going to be leveraged during this time a little bit more. So definitely put up a post on the social media channels about your closures and your situation. And for your most valuable customers, and I think everybody, we all agree, if you're a smaller agency and if you can call every customer, go ahead and call them. But if you're a larger organization and your time is limited or your capabilities are limited on how many people you can reach out to, then definitely call your most valuable customers. And once again, in brackets, yes, pick up the phone. That personal approach during this time is definitely going to be appreciated and is going to be remembered by your customers. So now's the time to ensure that you brush up on your customer service skills. Let's not keep it cold on emails. Pick up the phone, especially because you can't go and visit them, and let them hear your voice. Get social. That's definitely a big thing. Social media usage right now is soaring because a lot of people are at home and it's a big way to communicate. So ensure that your customers' channels are all up to date. They have the relevant information, and organizations should be communicating and creating posts during this time, and even include employees in those posts and communicate with your employees during this time, especially during closures. If you're a smaller organization, if you're a boss, ensure that you're still saying hello to all your colleagues and everybody that works in your organization. So maintain those relationships. Reputation management is going to be a big thing during this time. And there is kind of a potential opportunity for businesses with reputation problems because for once, everybody's focusing on something else. So you now have a potential opportunity to be a hero if you're able to help the community. Anytime as a community we're facing situations, no matter how bad someone's been, if they're going to start helping you out, people are going to really appreciate that. And a lot of that negativity is slowly going to start getting washed. So if you have a business with reputation problems, this is your potential opportunity to help out your community, do a good thing, and be rewarded with a little bit of a better reputation during this time. If you are a business without reputation problems, whether it doesn't matter if you have reputation problems or not, closely monitor all the comments that are being posted online, whether it's through articles, blogs, social media posts, anything that might be negatively put out. Make sure that you're monitoring all your comments during this time. Evaluate and plan is a big thing for businesses. With a lot of the uncertainties that are happening, businesses shouldn't be just sitting there and just waiting. They should be creating a plan, and they should be thinking long term. If you're one of those businesses that are going to be affected negatively during this time, then think about a long-term plan of how you're going to recoup those losses when things start getting back to normal. Don't wait until the last minute. Because everybody's going more towards online, think about potentially expanding your digital offering to your customers so that way you can maintain your sales during this time. And if you're a business that hasn't thought about getting online from a digital technology perspective, then start thinking about that. Some examples could be, let's say, an optical store. Perhaps they are just a regular brick and mortar store where people are coming in, but people buy glasses online today. People can submit their prescriptions online. So adding that technology during this time will allow you to still operate with as little interruption to your business. So definitely start looking into those technologies. If you're a customer that's looking to cancel your marketing, it's probably just a rash decision people are making because they don't know what's going to happen. But we never recommend that businesses cancel their marketing. What they should be doing is just pausing it instead. And focus your efforts on your marketing on any sort of long-term strategies. If your local location is closed for whatever reason, that's not the only form of marketing there is to drive traffic to your store. You still have to build relationships. You still have to communicate. So when things start getting better, those customers are going to keep coming back. So awareness campaigns, client retention programs, those are all going to be very important during this time period. Also, as a business, figure out what will sell during this time. If you sell a wide variety of things, and look at really what people can still buy during this time to maintain your sales. Even if it's not as profitable, you still need to be able to continue some transactions so that way your business keeps moving. So don't worry too much about profits. Worry about how you can keep your business moving during this time. Focus on client retention. So as I mentioned earlier, client retention strategies are going to be very important. Now's the best time to start building awareness campaigns because awareness does take some time to turn into leads. And while people are spending more time at home, you're going to have probably a better bang for your buck on your awareness campaigns. And last but not least, we always recommend our agencies to remind customers that, as businesses, a lot of the governments are giving back to the small businesses to help them during this time, whether it's tax credits or additional benefits. Ensure that, they're being reminded to take advantage of those credits so that way they see as little impact on their business during this time. And those extra benefits will definitely provide those businesses with more stability, and that will come back to you with ensuring that your marketing programs aren't canceled either as well. So definitely something to keep that communication going. So these are all the recommendations that we recommend from a client perspective. Let's move on to how as agencies we can better protect ourselves and how we can deal through this situation as well, because I think that's what we're all here for as well. First and foremost, just like your customers, you have to keep communicating. You have to communicate to your audience about your closures, any sort of changes, interruptions in your business. So just like you're recommending to your customers to update their Google My Business and directories, do the same for yourself as well. Put up signs on your business to notify customers if you have a local location about how to use how to use your services during those closures and how to communicate with you. Once again, email your customers, letting them know it doesn't matter how large or how small of an agency you are, you should be sending out a general notice to assure customers that things are moving, unless, of course, there are any sort of service interruptions on your side. And once again, if you can, try to call your customers, be a little bit more customer service oriented. And if you can't call all of your customers, at least focus on your most valuable customers. And your most valuable customers aren't necessarily the guys that are spending the most amount of money with you. It's also people that may have the best connections for you, the best relationships. So you have to kind of evaluate who your best clients are with that regard. But like I said, try to call everybody. If you can't, focus on your most valuable ones at least, and send everybody else an email to let them know about the situation. Preparation is going to be absolutely key, whether it's your customer as an agency yourself. We're both businesses, and we need to ensure that we're properly planning and preparing. So sales planning is going to be one of the areas that a lot of organizations are really going to be focusing their efforts on, especially their lead generation tactics during this time. The standard way of lead generation may not always be working during this time. I mean, if you were focusing on, let's say, virtual ways, then it's probably not going to be too different. But if you were focused on, let's say, a lot of direct channel marketing face-to-face, then a lot of your lead generation tactics definitely have to be planned very differently to ensure that you're still maintaining leads during this time. Any sort of emergency interruption procedures for your business should be definitely discussed and openly discussed between all your colleagues, so they know what to do when an emergency situation happens, how they need to handle that situation. Remember, the most prepared businesses are the ones that are going to show the most amount of stability to their customers during this time period, and that's what's going to help those customers stay with you during this time. So don't wait until the last minute. Do all your preparations and planning and internal meetings so everybody understands what to do during emergencies. Any sort of financial forecasting and invoicing is going to be very important. Remember, a lot of businesses are kind of unsure about what's going to happen. They're going to be protecting their dollars. They may not be paying as quickly. So as agencies, make sure that you invoice people as quickly as you can. I mean, if it's automated direct credit card billing or something like that, great. But there are a lot of companies that still invoice their customers, whether it's for small amounts or large amounts. So to try to ensure that you're getting paid as quickly as possible so it doesn't affect your cash flow, ensure that you're invoicing your customers as quickly as possible. Send out those bills as quickly as possible. Evaluate your own marketing efforts. Every agency that may be spending money on marketing to drive leads for themselves, evaluate that, whether you're spending money in the right places. So try to ensure that you're looking at your business just like your customers will be looking at theirs. Any sort of remote staff. So a lot of agencies are working remote. Because of that, ensure that you have the right tools and the hardware to ensure that your business is operating, that you can communicate with your colleagues and fulfillment teams to ensure that things are operating smoothly. And if you're using third-party suppliers, check to make sure what their procedures are and if they're operating, and be prepared if they're not operating. Don't wait and find out 2 weeks from now that your supplier was closed for a week and a lot of things didn't get done. So start reaching out if you haven't already done so to your suppliers and find out if they're having service interruptions of their own. Now, during this time, there's going to be a lot of different ways you can handle your customers. But the very first and foremost recommendation we make is that you should definitely be assuring your customers that they can count on you. They are going to be looking to you definitely as somebody to help them through this process, especially from a business standpoint, and how much authority and calmness you show during this time is going to be relayed to your customer, and that's going to build a lot of trust. So ensure that you're assuring your customers that they can count on you. and make yourself available and provide more ways that they can communicate. If you're used to seeing people monthly or regularly face to face, well, now things are going to have to get a little virtual. So make sure that they have your emails, your cell phone number if possible, what to do in case there's an emergency, any sort of LinkedIn or social media profiles that you might have where people can communicate that way. The more opportunities that you give to your customers to communicate with you, the better that their relationship and the operations are going to be more smoother during this time. And definitely response times are going to be very important. Don't wait a week before you answer any emails and answer any phone calls and get back to your customers. Try to expedite that. Anytime there's a lot of uncertainty like this happening, customer service is going to make you really, really shine. So response times are going to be very important. Stay on top of your customers as quickly as you possibly can. Of course, people are still going to be busy. People still have lives to run. Their businesses are being affected. I get it. But remember, if your customers are trying to reach out to you, try to answer them as quickly as you can. And definitely be ahead of the customers. And what do I mean by that? We're going to see a lot of businesses, because of their closures, spending time reviewing their marketing material, reports, and things like that that you've been sending to them. And we all know what happens when businesses start looking at it. Not everybody is a marketing analyst. They're going to start asking questions, whether it's good or bad. And, you need to ensure that your products are running smoothly and you're prepared. So definitely check in on your products and stay on top of things. If you are running marketing programs, just kind of keep up to date on the progress. Communicate with your fulfillment teams so that way you're ahead of your customers. And if you do have service interruptions of any sort, then be ahead and understand that if you have a campaign that's down, that you're ready when your customer reaches out to you about why it's down, or even send them a note before they reach out to you, let them know that something's happening and things are going to be okay soon, whatever interruption you may be facing. So definitely beat your customers to the punch when it comes to their marketing programs with you. If your customers are looking to cancel, then definitely, as I mentioned earlier, try to get them to pause their campaigns rather than canceling. A lot of that has to do with just rash decisions that people are trying to make very quickly. So think about that for a second, right? Just have them pause it if possibly they can. That's the best way to maintain relationships during this time and not lose customers. A lot of organizations still rely on contracts, physical contracts to go out, and you don't want to give a customer another opportunity where you have to go back and re-pitch the service, where they're going to come back to you with lower budgets or changes or just say no to reinvesting. Once they're with you as a pause, it's going to be much more easier to resume the services than to allow them to fully cancel the service. Any sort of renewals, some of the agencies have reached out to me and said, what should we do about renewals? Should we continue getting renewals? And absolutely yes. It's business as usual. Don't stop getting your renewals. If you're in an automated renewal system, fantastic. If you're in a system where you still have to go back and get renewals and sign new contracts, get those contracts signed. Even if your customer is very adamant about not advertising during this time for whatever reason, get them to at least sign the dot on a future contract, and that way you can process the order once it's time again and just assure them it's just being held. And you don't have an opportunity to go back and physically visit those customers. So having that paperwork already done is going to be definitely important. And offer digital contracts if you can. Try to get them virtually signed, or see if your organization can take acceptances over email or something, so you don't have to put yourself at risk and go there face to face to have these signed. So definitely important. And one little thing that a lot of large organizations may forget is that even though they're facing customers that may be pausing some of their programs, when things start getting a little bit better, it's going to create a little bit of a frenzy. A lot of companies are going to want to start interacting and getting online right away, and they're going to want to be up yesterday. And you know what happens when you have customers like that? Most agencies deal with them a few at a time. But when you're going to have a large number of customers coming back looking to get their campaign started again yesterday, it's going to create a lot of headaches on your fulfillment team, your contracts teams, and so forth. So try to avoid that rush by having these contracts already pre-signed and in your system. And if things get a little bit better before that post-dated contract, great. Just move the date up. whatever you can to facilitate the process. What products to sell during this time is definitely probably a huge question that's going on through your minds at this point, is how as an agency can we operate? Is there still business? Are people spending money? Are there still leads to be generated? And the simple answer for that right now is yes. There are a lot more businesses that are looking to advertise. There are businesses still spending money, and there are a lot of new businesses still looking for marketing companies. Just because one business may be not spending doesn't mean that every business is. So there's still lots of opportunities out there. You just have to be a little clever about it. If you're one of those agencies that are struggling for lead generation and bringing in new business, reevaluate those strategies. Perhaps look at different industries that are thriving during this time and focus on them. Maybe start going out and looking at referrals and focusing on reaching out to your customers to get a referral program in place where they can refer some customers over to you. So definitely reevaluate. Of course, there are going to be some agencies which are rocking during this period still, and there are going to be some agencies which are going to be struggling a little bit. But at the end of the day, the economy is still moving. And like I said, it will start changing almost on a weekly basis. So let's kind of stay on top of things and let's not start getting negative at any moment. Stay positive. Some of the things that we've seen from marketing programs, let's start off by talking about paid ads. Paid ads is probably the number one most asked for service we've ever had and will probably ever be. And that's because the average business is going to spend most of their money on lead generation programs. So paid advertising has always been that number one program that's been asked. And we have seen an increase in campaigns being paused over the last couple of weeks, but pretty much it's all the businesses that are being shut down at the local levels and organizations that are running trade shows and events. Other businesses, we haven't really seen any slowness or pausing in that regard. But we definitely have seen that increase. Now, a lot of times when people look at paid advertising, it's not just about driving traffic to your website and generating leads and having somebody answer your phone calls. Paid ads can also be used for a lot of other things. It could be used to create awareness. It could be used to create retention programs, coupons for future purchases, getting people to sign up for newsletters so that way you're still acquiring lead information. You can do a lot of things with paid ads still. So the need for somebody to stop their paid ad program for lead generation may be immediately impacted because of those closures, but there's still a lot more things that can be done with paid marketing that you can sell. So focus on the different tactics of pay-per-click and paid advertisements that you can sell that'll be beneficial for customers during this time. So as I mentioned, for example, if lead generation is going to be a problem, create a landing page and get people to sign up for newsletters or join up for a mailing list of some sort. That way you're still acquiring information of potential prospects that you can then email market to afterwards. So you can do a lot of different things. If at any point in time you have a customer and you're wondering what you can probably do with this customer, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you and make some recommendations as well. Some of the areas that we're not seeing really affected by COVID-19 at the moment is definitely the long-term products. SEO and web design has not really seen any declines. But to be honest with you, I don't think we've had any sort of cancellations over the last couple of weeks with web design or SEO. They've all been pretty straightforward. Even when people are pausing their programs, when we recommend keep your SEO going because it's long-term, people are holding to that. They are running their SEO programs. So we haven't really seen any declines in the SEO and web design front yet. Critical products are probably not going to really see any cancellations. People aren't going to be canceling their web hosting or their email products or other technology products that might be also cheaper as well. Those are the ones that are probably just going to slide through and people are going to require anyways. So any sort of tech products will probably still be okay. From a display advertising perspective, we have seen some decline with some customers that are slowing down their expenditures on display. But once again, it's all based on expectations. If your customer's trying to use a display campaign for a lead gen campaign, which is not the most recommended way of doing things, then, yes, they are going to be stopping it. But display is a huge form of brand awareness, and brand awareness will take some time to turn into lead generation. So during this whole time, even if your business can't operate to its full capacity or peak efficiency, you're still going to need to ensure that when you're starting your marketing programs again for lead generation, that people recognize who you were and your message or your brand message isn't lost during this time. And that's going to help you acquire those businesses back much faster. So what we recommend is definitely don't slow down your programmatic investments. If anything, maybe your geofencing might be better off switched over to programmatic. And that's because a lot of companies use geofencing as a way to target their competitors. And if those competitors are closed, well, you're not really going to get impressions because there's nobody in those areas. So in order to still maintain fulfillment, switch some of those geofencing to programmatic, and that'll keep things moving. Now, some of the products that we're seeing where there's an increase in demand, social media marketing, absolutely we're seeing an increase. A lot of people are going to social media right now because that's where people are spending more time while they're at homes. So we're seeing a huge, definitely a demand increase in social media marketing. Any sort of reputation management products, a lot of companies and small businesses are definitely focusing on those products right now. We have seen more demand and increase in lead generation from web design and branding related activities. So anybody that's looking to revamp their website, anyone's looking to revamp their logo and their sales collateral and materials, any sort of work related around that, we are seeing an increase. And that's because business owners are now, as I mentioned earlier, have more times to reevaluate their business. So they're thinking of rebranding. They're thinking of, fixing some of their issues on their websites, maybe rebuilding some new, better looking landing pages. So that way, when it gets back to normal, there's no frenzy of getting things done and delays, because there will be a lot of delays in some agencies, especially the larger ones where fulfillment's going to take a little bit of a hit to keep, to keep up with the demand. So, get ahead of the curve, and web design is definitely something that you can sell during this time. Any sort of web tools like chatbots and uptime monitoring, those are all still going very well. We are seeing an increase a little bit in that. A lot of people are using things like chatbots to stay connected with COVID-19 and what to do and so forth with their business. Uptime monitoring, especially, they want to make sure that their websites aren't going down or any sort of negative effects during this time. So those are the areas where we're definitely seeing an increase in demand: the social, the rep, the web design, and the web tools. And there are going to be other products as well that are probably going to change. Something, for example, with paid search, you might see some of your customers pausing, but it may start showing up that it's going to start increasing again. So once again, it's still very early, but this is what we're seeing right now, and this is what our recommendations are. I don't expect that it's going to really change over the next few weeks. So this, I think, would be a good strategy for most sales agents to kind of keep track of. Now, the last thing that I'm going to leave with everybody during this time, and I think it's a very important message to send out to all agencies, is we all have to stay positive, right? I know there's a lot of uncertainties out there, but forget the pandemic for a second. Forget about COVID-19. This is just a catalyst that's creating a lot of the effects that's happening in our economy with these closures and staying at home and so forth. The funny thing is, aside from the pandemic, these type of reactions are not new to this world. A lot of economies have faced closures and people working from home and this and that, and people being laid off with recessions and so forth. If you're really looking at doing any sort of research about how to stay ahead of this curve, don't go out and research and look for other pandemics. Look for other recessions and what other businesses can do to work with clients during this time, because it's all the same. Whether you have a pandemic, a hurricane, a government policy, something that happens high level that's affecting, the same interaction is going to happen. A lot of the same decisions that you're seeing happening around you is all the same. And it's up to us as businesses on how to identify those changes and then figure out a reactive plan to work around that. So stay positive. Things are going to get better. Don't let some few cancellations, if you're facing any, worry you. There's always other areas and other businesses spending dollars as well. If at any point in time, as I mentioned, you need any sort of assistance or you want to pass some ideas or have some conversations, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to have those conversations with you as well. On that note, I won't take up too much more of your time. I definitely want to thank everybody for joining us during this webinar. Hopefully you've learned a little bit. And if there's any more ideas or any more topics or even deeper discussions you'd like us to do for our next digital discovery webinar, please do reach out to us. We're always looking for more ideas and more things. We love to create these webinars, which are really about getting marketers to become better marketers. We've had a lot of positive interaction and comments from this. So we'd love to keep this going as well. So reach out to us. And once again, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.